Hello, and welcome to this episode of Spiritual Campfire. My name is Matt Alexander. I will be your storyteller, and I'm also the author of this book, Glimpses of Atlantis, Bigfoot, and Aliens. No, you're not going crazy, you're awakening. This book is really some stories pulled from my journal over the decades of weird happenings to me, and those weird happenings sped up once I started meditating and thinking about consciousness and letting go of the idea of atheism. So, first story I'd like to get into today. Some of you folks might like this type of story. So, when I was in my mid-20s, maybe 26, 27, somewhere around there, I was in graduate school, and my project was researching woodpeckers, montane woodpeckers in California. So I spent 2 summers camping up and down the state of California, areas that are above 4,000 foot elevation. The nice thing about California is that once you get above that elevation, there's been so much logging over the last 200 years that there are logging roads everywhere, and you could spend your lifetime just exploring those logging roads. So what I did for my project was just basically car camp. I would just have my bare necessities, and I would drive, do my research. Then when I got close to sunset, I'd pull over somewhere, set up my tent, eat my dinner. Sun would set, I'd go to bed because I'd be up with the sunrise. And this particular trip, I was with my academic advisor. He went with me a couple times, and we drove to the area north of San Francisco where the North Coast Range comes down, and you can actually come up and start down in the lowlands north of San Francisco and work your way up into the North Coast Range. And the idea was to sort of come up to the Oregon border and over to Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen, and that was the plan. So when we first got there, we started to rise up in elevation, and to get to the area that we wanted to go, which was the highest part along the mountain ridges there, we had to go up this just terrible road. And I've been all over California, and what made this road so dangerous is it was a few thousand-foot elevation gain, and it was on a scree slope, so basically just jumbled rock. There's no trees. The logging road's only big enough for one car, and basically if you go over the edge, you're going to fall a couple thousand feet to your death. There's no trees to stop you. So it was really nerve-wracking. It was a long day trying to get up there, and then by the time we got up there and we started hiking around, we weren't having any success. And then the closest I've ever come to stepping on a rattlesnake happened that afternoon. We were following a trail, and I was literally bringing my foot down onto the trail. And at the last second, I looked down, and I saw the rattler coiled. He wasn't rattling. So that in itself was stressful on top of the trip to get up there. So once we decided we were done, we set up our tent. And we had 2 tents and my pickup truck, so we were kind of shaped like a C with the 2 tents and the pickup truck. And it was amazingly beautiful because that part, you can actually look to the west and see the Pacific Ocean. So we did our normal routine. We don't do campfires, it's too much work. You just have some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and talk a little bit, plan for the next day. And then we were ready to go to bed. But as we were watching, the sunset had been down for a while, and then overcast clouds started coming off the ocean, and the wind was blowing towards us, and the creep factor just ratcheted up immediately. It was like a Bruce Campbell Evil Dead movie. Chunks of cloud the size of cars were floating past us, and even between me and my academic advisor. And we watched it for a while, and we hadn't seen anyone for a couple days because it gets really remote up there. And so we decided to go to bed. And so we got in our tent, and you're so exhausted that you pretty much fall asleep immediately because you're going to be up at the sunrise. And I had just fallen asleep when in my tent, I was laying like this, and my pickup truck was here. So I was the middle tent, and then my academic advisor was over here. And I was asleep, but I heard a crunch noise and it snapped me awake. And when I was laying there, I heard it was over here. So I'm laying there, and when that happens in the woods like that, your hair on your arm and your neck raises and your fight or flight instincts crank up. But what are you going to do? It's dark and you're in the middle of nowhere. So you just start straining your ears as hard as you possibly can to try to pick up on that noise. And sure enough, I heard it again, just crunch. And as I lay there, everything starts racing through your brain. You're like, is this a deer? No. Deer feet are really small. They don't weigh enough to make crunchy noises on the pine needles on the forest floor. Is it a bear? Is it a mountain lion? No, they have padded feet, right? They gotta be quiet for their prey. So I wouldn't be hearing them because they don't weigh enough. Crunch. I hear it again. And as I'm laying there, I can notice that it's starting to come around my academic advisor's tent, and then crunch, and then it's coming around my tent. So at this point, it's very even, and you just feel it's bipedal. I mean, there's just no getting around that feeling. And so it seemed like forever, but it slowly walked around and then got around behind my truck, and it sounded like it was like right up at my truck, maybe even looking in the windows. And then it came around to the front of my truck, and then it's the consistent crunching, the stalking crunching stopped. And I just laid there and I was just listening as hard as I could. And I don't know if it was something, I've heard people talk about this, where it was so scary that my body just shut me down and put me to sleep. I'm not sure. But I fell asleep, and I don't know if I laid there listening to it for 30 minutes, waiting to hear it again, or if it was 5 minutes. I just lost track of time. It was really hard to tell. But the next morning, I asked my, companion there, I said, hey, did anything wake you up last night? And he goes, no, I didn't hear anything. I slept like a baby. So I didn't have anyone else to, try to corroborate it with. But interestingly enough, there is a really good psychic remote viewer, and she takes clients. And so I had a session with her, and I worked really hard at testing her. I was asking her things that I knew the answer to. And sure enough, man, she would say, where is it? What year is it? What month? As close to the day as you can. And the best I can tell, she's focusing on your particular aura and energy and finding it in that space and time. And so once I was pretty satisfied that, she knew what she was doing, I got to that particular question about what happened to me when I was camping that time. And I made sure not to lead her. And I expected her, if she was full of crap, I expected her to say, oh, a UFO landed and kidnapped you, but she didn't. So I said, hey, on this day, because I had really good journal notes when I was in grad school, I said, on this day, we were north San Francisco, about this far, we're camping, there was 2 tents and a truck, and she goes, yeah, hold on, and she focused for a while, and she goes, okay, was it a white truck? I go, yeah, it was a white truck. She goes, okay, was it close to a full moon? I was like, yeah, I think it was, because we were able to see pretty good as we were getting into our tents. And I said, something strange happened that night. Can you tell me what happened? And so she thought about it for a minute, and she goes, oh, a juvenile Bigfoot popped in. Okay. What do you mean? Well, they can portal in and out of our space. So he noticed your aura and, the light of your personage and came in to check it out. It was a juvenile Sasquatch. So he portaled in, he walked around your tent, and he portaled out and he left. So that's super fascinating to me because, 20 years ago, I thought Bigfoot was just, a gigantopithecus, right? Just an ape that we lost, just blood and bones. But in the last 5 years, I've really come to the realization that I think that A, they do exist, and B, I think there's just something more paranormal about them than, the Bigfoot folks that just think that, they're flesh and blood and they're just really good at hiding next to trees. So anyways, that's probably one of my best Bigfoot stories I experienced. And if you bought the book, Glimpses of Atlantis, Bigfoot, and Aliens, thank you very much. And if there's a particular chapter you'd like me to discuss in this format, please leave a message in the comments and I'll do the best I can. Thanks.